Hiya! Welcome to this, my 93rd episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled Trudy's Gift, I talk about the Monk series finale turning up in my collection, plus comments on Moonlighting, Fringe, actually, Fringe in both collections, wacky, and ta-da, more Indigo Girls, and I can share clips now. Who knew? Welcome to the show! He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy. Yep, along with the many Indigo Girl songs in my collection, episode 10 of VideoFuzzy, the soundtrack titled Karamia, I talked about a VHS tape they released in 1995 called Watershed, featuring music videos and backstage behind-the-scenes recordings. It made more sense to talk about that release in this podcast, so I'll share some comments on that coming up. And in the meantime, if you haven't already, you can check out that episode wherever you get your podcasts. And now, VideoFuzzy presents Fuzzy Feature. Picture it! Mandan, May of 2024. I've cataloged 23 discs. I'm despairing of a fuzzy feature. I've run into a bunch of 4th season Adrian Monks, as well as some naughty commercials, discs worth of Daily Show episodes, 1st season Prison Breaks, 1st and 2nd season entries from Numbers. I found, a pilot episode of Venture Brothers in here, early American Dad, and Tom Goes to the Mayor from Adult Swim. Along with the season 4 Monks, I was surprised to encounter the second to last episode as well, season 8, episode 15, Mr. Monk and the End, part 1, on disc 5091. I've learned not to get too excited in situations like this. I tried to build a feature around half a Psych episode once, and it haunts me to this day. But by disc 1600, I encountered the second half of the finale, Mr. Monk and the End, part 2, and Abe Vigoda, I had my feature. Monk ran for 8 seasons on USA, beginning in the summer of 2002 and airing its final episode in December of 2009. Tony Shalhoub took on the title role of Adrian Monk, a gifted police detective, and as we met him, a pile of human wreckage in the wake of his wife Trudy's death. He'd become consumed by obsessive-compulsive disorder, germophobia, all the phobias really, fastidious in his personal habits, and reliant on personal assistant Biddy Schramm as Sharon Fleming in early episodes, and Traylor Howard as Natalie Teeger from season 3 onward. Psychological barriers proved all but insurmountable to resuming his position in an official capacity, but he was a go-to consultant for any remotely challenging case across the desk of Ted Levine as Captain Leland Stottlemyre, assisted by Jason Gray Stanford as Lieutenant Randy Disher. The murder of his wife proved to be the most challenging Monk faced, however, and our understanding was that his mind was always working at whatever else was going on. Occasionally he honored her memory by visiting her grave or recreating their honeymoon getaway. Sometimes he'd pull all the evidence from her case, be inspired to chase down a new lead, only to be reminded he'd made the same revelation a year before, and the year before that. The Kelly Street problem. It's a person, it's not a street, but she's just about expecting his visit now. I guess he blocks all memory of the revelation from one year to the next. This was maybe the most disappointing aspect of the character. He's wicked smart, figures out whodunit in 100-plus situations that left the professional police force baffled, but there'll be dog mess on a crime scene, or there'll be a snake loose in a home they're investigating, or San Francisco will have a garbage strike, and that mind just can't function anymore. Not in any consistent way either. He'll have little pissing contests with fellow compulsives over who their therapist likes more, or he'll get super cheap and not pay his assistant, who we later discover is Richard Cretius, heiress to a toothpaste fortune, and the whole episode is her counting the pennies for everything he asks of her. He turns a humidifier on across from a dehumidifier, lets him fight it out. His life was so devastatingly circumscribed by this painful awkwardness, and the writers delighted in making it worse. There was one situation he was in a jam session with. He was a huge fan of Willie Nelson, and the reed for his clarinet was wet by a roadie before it was handed to him. "Oh, let me wet that for you," he said, and it was in his mouth. Everyone behaved like Monk was at fault for not wanting to play it. His refusal to do so was going to ruin everything. And I'm like, excuse me, you don't have to be a germaphobe to want to wet your own damn reed. It's Willie friggin' Nelson. He'll have a box of them. Get him a new one. It's the usual problem for this kind of neurodivergence to get played for laughs, but it's an hour-long dramatic comedy that generally hinges on a mystery written by very average writers for cable television, so there's a lot of time to fill. All of this is backdrop for the 2-part series finale, in which writers took on the task of wrapping 8 seasons worth of Trudy case lore into a neat little package. A tiny green one sitting on a shelf in Adrian Monk's home for a run of the series. Trudy's last present to him, which he'd never opened because it was his way of keeping one last secret, and which he assumed was a digital watch anyway. Well, it was not. It was, well, spoilers. We open on a death at the community obstetrics clinic Monk remembers from a case 12 years before, a missing persons case looking into the disappearance of a midwife from the clinic, the last case he investigated for learning of Trudy's death by car bomb. The doctor they were talking to then, played by Ed Begley Jr., is found dead, interrupted as he was scanning the facility's records into a database. Monk is startled by the coincidence, but partial print puts them on the trail of a career criminal who was hired to stop the information from being transferred, because if the police look into the incident at all, they'll put 2 and 2 together and discover the man responsible for Trudy Monk's death. So far, none of this makes much sense. A missing midwife shouldn't result in Trudy being blown up in a parking garage. However, the potential for discovery hits so close to home that Monk himself is targeted with a nearly untraceable synthetic toxin that his consulting physician, played by D.B. Woodside, said will result in his death in 48 hours. There's a lot of time spent taking Monk's home apart looking for the source of the toxin, and Monk worrying that they won't put everything back properly because he has a system. There's an absolutely hilarious exchange between him and psychiatrist Hector Elizondo as Dr. Bell. He's so confident they'll find an antidote, he starts entering Monk's future sessions into his calendar. Monk points out that he's using a pencil. He's writing them in pencil. There's a pen right there. He's using the pencil because he'll need to erase them. Accepting that the end is in sight, Natalie takes Monk to visit Trudy's grave, where he says a very quick goodbye. Natalie asks if he doesn't want to say more, but anything he has to say he'll say in person presently. Then he asks for Trudy's gift. He opens it up. It is not a digital watch, as he suspected. Instead, it's a videotape, the contents of which he could have viewed at any time at all, and which blew the lid off Trudy's murder investigation. In their remaining final moments together, Trudy asked him about that missing persons case, the midwife called Wendy Stroud. In the tape, she said she knew who that was. The law professor she had long ago fling with got her pregnant, but wanted nothing to do with her. She brought the child to term, and Wendy told her the child only survived 9 minutes. She was never allowed to even hold her. Well, the law professor became a judge, Craig T. Nelson as Judge Rickover, the judge signing off on the warrant of the arrest of the career criminal responsible for Stroud's disappearance and Monk's poisoning, and Monk realizes his wife's murder. Trudy said in the tape that she was going to meet him, that he sounded so strange, and if Monk is watching this tape, it means she never had a chance to switch it out for the digital watch that he was expecting, and, in fact, that the judge had killed her. Monk confronts the judge, who dismisses Trudy as some lovesick long-ago loon, and Monk attacks him, ending up in the hospital. The timeline gets really wonky here. The police are high-drama pursuing Monk's poisoner through a train yard, and he ends up getting schmucked by a train, and oh no, they'll never figure out how Monk was poisoned and he'll die. But while Natalie is gathering his things for the hospital room, she starts experiencing Monk's initial symptoms. Oh my god, it's the wipes! I've been using his wipes! Having isolated the source of the toxin, they instantly develop an antidote and would administer it, but Monk has already drugged his guard and slipped out of the hospital to confront the judge at his home, forcing him at gunpoint to dig up the body of the missing and, as it turns out, murdered midwife. No one would care about a long-ago affair, but the unearthed remains from the long-ago murder of Wendy Stroud is a different story, and a judge, terrified of the truth coming out and jeopardizing his appointment, might kill a midwife threatening to expose infidelity and a secret child. "Take care of her!" the judge shouts at Monk as he grabs a gun and ends his own life. Apparently, this law professor arranged for Trudy's child to be abducted and given up for adoption. After he was tapped to become an appellate judge, the midwife found religion and told him she was going to report it. The midwife ended up buried underneath Judge Rickover's sundial, which Monk couldn't understand why anyone put a sundial under a giant tree. Then who uses a sundial as a sundial? Mr. I'm getting a digital watch for Christmas in 1997. If it had been a bird bath or a gazebo, I guess no one would have suspected a thing. That's apparently why the judge would never move, despite lots of pressure to join the state Supreme Court. He never wanted to leave the house because of the dead body on his property. Going through some old case notes, Monk recontextualizes a scrap of throwaway information about Wendy Stroud rehoming an orphan girl and realizes this is Trudy's daughter. A little investigation with Children's Home Services finds that 26-year-old Molly Evans, who is thrilled to meet him, and encourages Monk to keep investigating. Trudy's final gift to Monk: closure, and someone to love and take care of. In and among all of this, we're getting weird vibes from Lieutenant Disher, who finally info dumps, I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you all. I guess it's now. He's accepted a job as police chief in Summit, New Jersey, as Natalie guesses to be near Sharona, who they're apparently a thing now. He asks if Captain Stottlemyre thinks he'll do well, and Stottlemyre says, I don't think anything. I know you will. He's pleased as all get out. As the episode draws to a close, final montage is beautiful. Lots of best moments from the series, closing in on Randy in uniform showing up at his new job, pic of Sharona on his desk, Leland's Trudy in a breakfast nook sending him off on his next adventure, Natalie helping Monk on the case, Randy Newman singing the outro, I think you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. Okay, so, lots of thoughts. I'll start here. I never loved the development of the Trudy arc through the series. I didn't think they'd had a consistent sense of what actually happened. I just do not understand how she came to record that tape at that moment. If she was afraid of Rickover, don't meet him. Honestly, when would he have had a chance to place the car bomb? It's just a feeling she was having. She could have brought anyone with her. Monk's a detective. She could have brought a bunch of unis with her. But yeah, it wasn't that she was a secret spy or that she'd faked her own death. It wasn't a story she was covering as a reporter. It was never anything to do with Kelly Street, and I saw that explosion. Her corneas would not have been available for donation. This 6th season episode where Monk kept bothering this recipient because he recognized them somehow. There's a lot to overlook, and in all reality, we're able to. A lot of Monk's problems are his own. Just because he's been chasing every possible lead desperate for resolution doesn't mean that the case was ever more complicated than this. Had that clinic's records stayed locked in their paper files, no partial print been left, and no warrant been issued or signed by that specific judge, Monk would never have been targeted, perhaps never opened that gift, and, by extension, never met Molly. More to the point, I think he knew this, but I can only imagine what it meant to hear it, the recording of his beautiful wife saying to him, as it turns out, one last time, you are more than the love of my life. You are my life. So yeah, the schmaltz is thick and the joins are jagged, a result of 100 average writers going for the heartstrings over 124 episodes, making us understand from a lot of different directions how important this woman was to Monk, and letting us see, in especially this episode, how important Monk is to her. Oh, and Captain Stottlemyre would know Randy had taken a job as a police chief in Summit, New Jersey. He would be Randy's first reference. They'd have called him. Cross-country moves are disruptive. He'd have been making prep. They would have called him. Stottlemyre would be as likely to break the news to Randy that he'd been accepted as the Summit, New Jersey people. And they'd had a start date in mind. The most ridiculous... Well, it is Randy. It was good. It was fine. Monk gets closure on his most intractable case, and it doesn't fix him, but he's definitely a lot less broken. Molly and Monk making space for each other in each other's life, and all of which goes on. It wasn't perfect, but it was fine. A fine farewell.
I associate many things with many things.
Cross connection. This two-part finale, in fact, locks the series into one of the tightest connections. Studio Murphy under challenge, the mystical centrality of my collection through Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, 6 Feet Under, or any Ryan Murphy production. Ed Begley Jr. appears in the role of a medical professional, tying this work to 6 Feet Under. Tony Shalhoub, of course, worked with Steven Weber in, a Season 5 episode of Monk, as well as nearly the entire series of Wings. Weber is credited in nearly every episode of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, strip, so there's that tie as well. And in other connections, I found a bunch this time. Archiving the Moonlighting series through the mid to late 80s, I encountered guest stars Orson Welles, Cole Meany, Whoopi Goldberg, Mark Lynn-Baker, John Goodman, and Imogene Coca. Eva Marie Saint recurring as Maddie Hayes' mom. Long acknowledged golden thread in this effort, Jeff Perry turned up on my screen again, this time in an episode of Numbers, and Time Odd that Dad for 3 seasons of Kung Fu on the CW turned up in the 2nd season episode of Fringe, where we also saw Monty Python Terry Gilliam-esque cartoonery brought in as acid trip for mad scientist Walter Bishop, and Stephen Root appeared in the 4th season episode. Jason Alexander helped kick off the 4th season of Monk, and Mr. Monk had the other detective, and almost certainly a golden thread of some sort. Sharon Lawrence appeared in a 1st season episode of Community. Along with his appearance as toxicologist in the 2-part Monk finale, D.B. Woodside turned up in a 2nd season episode of Castle alongside Jossverse alum Nathan Fillion, also in the 7th season of Buffy, as well as being Captain Tightpants from Firefly. And I had a 2nd season Dollhouse episode featuring Eliza Dushku, Alexis Denisoff, and Summer Glau, between the 3 of them appearing in a half-dozen Joss Whedon productions. Other Jossverse connections turning up this time, I found Sunnydale Mayor Harry Grainer in a 2nd season episode of Medium, and Felicia Day from Dr. Horrible sing-along blog in a 4th season episode of Monk, appearing with Chris D'Elia and, oh yeah, Larry Clarke. Golden Thread. Larry Clarke is a golden thread. He played a lot of things once. He was in and Out. He was a monk in Buffy. He was in Monk as Rudy Schick. He was in Boston Legal. He was in Close to Home. He played different characters in Grey's Anatomy and spin-off Private Practice, always interesting. He was in My Name is Earl, Medium, The Closer, The Shield. He was in Burn Notice, Numbers, Life, Bones. He was in The Informant as well as Saving Grace, Criminal Minds, Castle, Raising Hope, and he was in a 1st season episode of BoJack Horseman. I mentioned Sharon Lawrence up there. I feel that this is also her time to shine. I've talked about her appearances in Desperate Housewives, Battlestar Galactica, Rebel, and, Dirt for sure. I've been watching her, I'm sure, since her appearances in Cheers, Star Trek Voyager, and Caroline in the City, almost certainly in my collection with appearances in Boston Legal, Monk, Grey's Anatomy, The Glades, Body of Proof, Drop Dead Diva, Solace, Rizzoli and Isles, and certainly after I stopped watching, but apparently in Criminal Minds as well. Nice. Lawrence provides a very textured performance to her roles, infusing a depth I think is deliberate, even in one-note studies. I feel like in her hands, her characters develop and relate a backstory that makes for richer storytelling. Good work. Diving into my classic collection. In my classic VHS to DVD transfers for this set, I cataloged discs 1576 to 1600, and one of the most significant finds was, me. I was on my own promoting the Evening of One Act we had going as a fundraiser for the Parker Senior Center in March of 2005, and appeared with Michelle Vogie to promote The Butler Did It Again in April of 2005. I wanted to share clips from these appearances, which is something I've not tried to do before. I explored the potential for making a screen grab of video as it played on my screen when I looked down to discover these funky ruby slippers on my feet. It seems that with the video conversion app on my PC, I've had the capacity to share video potentially from my entire collection of VHS transfers for as long as I've been talking to you, my video fuzzies. I say potentially because the sound was out of sync for one of the videos I converted. Michelle and my appearance on KMOT with host Mark Lyman, but my solo appearance with host Carla Burbage on CBS affiliate KXMC, even split across 2 discs, converted just fine. Well, I cleaned up the staticky sound recording best I could. We're all still at the mercy of the quality of the original recording. The resulting 2-minute clip is posted to Video Fuzzy's Instagram. You can check that out for yourselves, along with a few pics from the one acts I was talking about. I mentioned episodes of Fringe appearing in both my classic and current collections for this set. On disc 1598, I encountered a 2nd season episode of Fringe called Snakehead, where undocumented Chinese immigrants are given pills for seasickness and become the unwitting hosts for parasites, deeply unsettling worms I'll candidly note look to be built for her pleasure. Lots of squirmy tentacles on these things. The immigrants are kidnapped and the worms harvested for a Chinese gang for their medicinal properties and sold to the insanely wealthy, while poor migrants are murdered and disposed of. The part that makes little sense is Walter, in encountering one of these parasites, gets completely blissed out by it. So why is it causing its host such distress if the nature of the worm is to be calm? I think it would have been even worse for them to report to their kidnappers feeling amazing and then die or get killed in recovering this great floppy creature from them, but I guess it'd be less dramatic. Oh well. I encountered a couple of animated series that were kind of fun. I found I'd archived a second ever episode of Seth MacFarlane's American Dad series, where Francine thinks it'd be fun to earn a paycheck and work outside the home as a realtor, and a cartoon version of Donald Trump wanders in from out of shot with his hand out for money if anyone says you're fired, which is a much more current joke of 2005. Also, from Adult Swim, I found the series premiere of Venture Brothers set in exotic Tijuana. Wow. Plus a few more Tom Goes to the Mayor entries and Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, featuring Peter Potamus.
You get that thing I sent you?
I surely did. This set, I caught a couple of commercials that seemed to play a little fast and loose with the moral code, or in one case I think at least hoped I wasn't paying attention. On disc 1582 during a first season episode of Criminal Minds, I had to run it back because I saw no less a person than, oh, for God's sakes, what are you people waiting for? Sir John Cleese, being funny somehow, and needed to see what that was about. Sir, yes, while he's still with us, please. We've already lost at least 2. Sir John. Oh, Google said he was up for it 3 decades ago. Thought it was silly it declined. Gotcha. Well, he would know, wouldn't he? Sir, all the same, John Cleese was sitting on a man's lap on a train, agreeing with him that, yes, quite right, this is a situation that calls for hilarious British comedy. The scene then shifts to a coffee shop where a bespectacled and besweatered young man, lap-hosting Tony Hawk, is playing a baller skateboarding routine and fashion somehow, then cut to a woman holding bald British rocker Seal on her lap while he sings a line from Crazy. Pan to a laptop computer touting a Centrino processor with this voiceover.
Want incredible entertainment experiences in your lap?
So, I'm an ad executive in 2005. I've got an integrated processor called a Centrino as I'm contemplating the best approach to interest a young demographic in expanded laptop capabilities. Individualized experiences, check. Portability, check. Then close on phrasing worthy of Archer catching Lana Ray, Pam, and Cyril naked in bed together with Cheryl swinging overhead from a chandelier holding an ocelot.
Are we not saying phrasing anymore?
Want incredible entertainment experiences in your lap?
Phrasing first, boo!
Of course we mean access to pop culture, movies, and music on our laptop computers. What else could we possibly, what did you think we meant? Giggity. A curiosity on its own, with it on disc 1590 during an episode of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, this one also from 2005, I got Sierra Mist, and it's a hot summer day, steaming, sweltering, and a young white man is being ticketed for being double parked. Offers the beautiful, also young, female officer of color some of the Sierra Mist he just ran in quick and bought. She rears up and accuses him of perhaps trying to bribe her, and he is very nervous as she takes control of the situation, pushes him against the vehicle to stop and frisk him, spread his legs. He says, "No, you misunderstand. I was just trying to be nice," to which she responds,
Well, me too. Hey now.
The rest of their physical interaction takes place out of shot, but from his reaction it is unexpected and quite pleasant, as the sudden, bubbly, Curb Your Enthusiasm style music underscores the comic release of tension. I was just trying to be nice. Oh yeah? Well, me too. Woo! I guess as more homes had DVRs and more people were skipping ads, agencies worked harder and harder to get people to watch them, and one pretty reliable way to do that is sex, which explains a pretty obvious flame. Oh, that's the word I made up for the shot that gets you to hit the stop button and rewind and see what the heck you were just fast-forwarding. Generally a puppy flying through the air or a snowman crashing a party. Once you see it, tends to not contribute much to the narrative, but it's too late anyway because you're already being sold something. I envision Floim, by the way, as a variation of the shorts, which is marketing in general. Think of Floim like back before DVRs when they aired commercials at higher volumes so you could still hear them from the kitchen or the bathroom. Floim is just a Professor Frankish Glaven that specifically works in fast forward. We can't stop you from fast forwarding, but we can make you question your choice in doing so. It sometimes works, and therefore, Floim. The young man being woman-handled in the Sierra Mist commercial certainly qualifies, as does the appearance of Sir John Cleese sitting on a man's lap, which gets me the suggestive phrasing. Probably there are lots of suggestive commercials from this time period that I did not stop and watch, and all I can say about that is they should probably have used better Floim. What else? Well, there's a few others I'll look at in my current collection, but I found USA's presentation of the 1997 Bruce Willis film The Jackal in this set, and it's interesting that turned up at the same set I was archiving a whole bunch of Moonlighting, but coincidences are just nutty sometimes. I also encountered a few discs full of Twilight Zone episodes, which, if you look at a whole bunch of them, you spot the occasional insight, but there were 5 seasons of the original production, and writers simply not up to 150 plus O. Henry-style twists. M. Night Shyamalan-style twists, maybe. I've found 15 in my collection, including one I was sure I missed somehow when I ran out of blank VHS tapes once, the one with Robert Redford as an injured cop seeking help from a sweet old recluse titled Nothing in the Dark. The recluse, incidentally, was played by Gladys Cooper, who has IMDb film credits dating back to 1913. I mention it because Robert Redford always gets mentioned in relation to this episode, overshadowing Cooper, a classic film star in her own right, and appearing in over 24 films through the 1940s alone, including Rebecca, The Song of Bernadette, and Madame Bovary. Music videos in this set that stood out was a dating game-style storyline for the Black Eyed Peas called Don't Funk With My Heart, Rob Thomas's world-shifting Lonely No More, and oh yeah, Jack Johnson's Sitting, Waiting, Wishing from 2005 is worth watching just for the strategy involved. A whole bunch of stuff the band walks and plays through as the film is run backwards to sync with the song. Just visually complicated and a fun song to enjoy while you're watching it. That link is in my show notes. Checking out my current collection. Shifting attention to my direct-to-digital current collection, this set added a whopping 17 discs to my archive, and is the primary reason this has taken as long as it has to put together. That and the Indigo Girls entry for VideoFuzzy the soundtrack was a job of work, and no, I haven't forgotten the tape I'm getting to. That's coming up shortly. Since Fringe made appearances in both segments, I'll start there. It was a case worthy of Fringe investigator Olivia Dunham herself. Well, maybe more in her guise as the noir detective we meet in Brown Betty. About a year ago, I noticed a channel I never watched was airing all 5 seasons of Fringe, and I said, yay, because it was a fantastic show, and I know for a fact there are many episodes that I missed, both viewing and archiving. Of course, I'll never know for sure how many until I complete my cataloging effort, so my little bundle of exactly 100 episodes of Fringe, as re-aired by HLN, sat undisturbed in my TiVo for about a year, at which point I noticed there were fewer. I was like, huh? I recorded them as keep for as long as possible, not arbitrarily discard whenever you feel like it, you ridiculous box, or, oh, wow, I looked at the recording dates, April of 2023. Had it been a year already? Okay, so I'm missing a few. No big deal. I was recording the show pretty steadily back when it first aired, the first season at least. I'll check back again later. I'm missing even more. Well, sadly, right through this time, we had a bunch of out-of-town travel planned. I did not have time to sit down and binge a bunch of Fringe. As it turns out, I didn't really have to. Not all of it. At any rate, the first 3 seasons of the show, there were a couple of important episodes I knew I had missed. The one, they'd redone the opening credits to evoke a 1980s vibe, which was called Peter. Another I knew I'd missed was called Brown Betty, which was a noir storyteller. But most significantly, as I moved from Minot to Bismarck, there were a few years of my dark ages I know for a fact I wasn't recording any of these, so my focus shifted, as it turns out just in the nick of time, to seasons 4 and 5, which, okay, I did indeed miss a few important story arcs getting there, but tracking Peter's reintegration into an entire alternate universe beyond the one we knew about, then tracking Peter and Olivia's daughter Etta and her resistance work against the Observers in the 2030s, I've got to say, I'm not sure I ever knew that was where the series took things, and I thought the resolution they found for the storylines was hugely satisfying. Of course, Season 5 was its own entire world, so they had to lay in some groundwork. Top of Season 4, Episode 19, titled Letters of Transit. This was the lead-in, scrolling mostly white text against a stark black background. They came from the future. At first, they only watched, arriving at key moments in human history. We called them observers, but in 2015 they stopped watching and seized control. Citizen uprisings proved bloody and futile. Those who survived became known as natives. In an attempt to show their allegiance, some native factions became loyalists and were marked by the observers. The original Fringe team fought the invasion, but was quickly defeated. Fringe division was allowed to continue at reduced capacity, but only to police the natives. The resistance was quickly overcome, or so they thought. That episode aired in 2012, so it's wild. Gotta say though, if the 27th century observers needed to infiltrate and manipulate their own past so as to create the future that allowed them to do these things, I'd have expected them to tread a little more lightly. Any situation you alter, any person you kill, eliminates entire potential time universes, and they seem to be killing us well-nigh indiscriminately. And there's the usual problem no one ever, or else very rarely, addresses of stepping from where you are in 2630 back through to where our planet was in 2015 or something, which by now is millions of miles away from where it is right now, in the same way as it is a million miles away from where it was in the year 1400. Psychophysical resonances can only do so much, especially when you're all dealing with at least a second version of our current reality that is such a precise physical overlay you can walk back and forth between them with almost zero issues. So, yep, I'm still missing a few, but decidedly fewer of them than I once was. Once I know for sure which episodes are missing from my collection entirely, I should be able to track them down and add them easily enough. I archived the balance of Feud, Capote versus the Swans from FX, which was quite enjoyable, if a bit tough to follow. I know Murph enjoys playing with form and story structure. Installments in the Versace crime story, for example, ran backwards chronologically, but the choices he made seemed to present the narrative in an engaging way. Character studies studded with piquant reveals here and there. It could have been quite dull, but between set and lighting, costumes, and oh wow, casting was brilliant. I'd have loved to see Leslie Jordan's run at this character. Author and bon vivant Truman Capote. As we may not, beyond the body of work known as Beverly Leslie in the Willenverse, Tom Hollander was brilliant, deliciously devilish, and so entirely took ownership of that voice in this role. Russell Tovey brought some dark, quite enjoyable energy as his deeply conflicted and at times abusive lover, and made wonderful contrast with Vito Schnabel as Rick, the corn-fed, beautiful but hopelessly unreconstructed AC repairman Truman propositions and takes along as an out-of-his-depth guest at social outings. The cast is Ryan Murphy's own next generation of stars. Nip Tuck featured such classic names as Catherine Deneuve, Jacqueline Bisset, and Vanessa Redgrave. Feud's first season paired Jessica Lange opposite Susan Sarandon. Sailing into this season were Naomi Watts, Chloe Sevigny, Diane Lane, Callista Flockhart, Molly Ringwald, Demi Moore, and Signet Ella Beatty. And it was so wonderful to watch Treat Williams just killing it in his final credited role. I once heard an equity-centered reason why Murph chose to bring these classic performers into current productions, and it refreshes their faded status and puts a comfortable retirement in better reach. And while that may indeed be a consideration from the performances I see, I think he casts them because they are damn fine actors and tell his stories exactly the way he wants them told. Either way, well done, sweet man. More recently, my binge shifted to Moonlighting on Hulu, and let me tell you this about that. Whatever pattern problems I identified in Greg Berlanti Productions outline most directly around the 5140 mark in my comments on the CW's Kung Fu in episode 74, The Psychic is Always Right, if you want a refresher. They were generally an improvement on the problems in pre-90210, pre-CSI, pre-Medium, Artie Mandelberg, Glenn Gordon-Caron productions. We'd sometimes get a crime in the cold open, but all too often it was some variation on Sybil Shepherd as former model Maddie Hayes arriving in the office to find Bruce Willis as colleague and air quotes detective David Addison in some unacceptable condition or another, leading a Rost-themed limbo party, hungover, or just hiding at the end of a trail of ladies' lingerie to get her attention. These resulted in usually quite predictable exchanges in which the writers stretched 2 minutes of dialogue into 5 with inane repetition, bluster, or describe the situation nonsense. David, I walk in here and find you with a Rasta-themed limbo party, hungover, or hiding at the end of a trail of ladies' lingerie to get my attention. How do you think I'd react? Half the time I expect them to look out at us, like we know. Things I thought were so impossibly clever when I was a teenager, constantly breaking the fourth wall.
I just have my hand on your behind. If I more serious, you're gonna move us to cable.
Or how cool I thought David Addison was. There's one where Sybil Shepherd lip-synced The Temptations perfectly, which also happened to be the episode where Bruce Willis stepped into a boxing ring, in part to thwart a high-profile assassination international incident, but mostly, I think, to puff up his audition reel for Pulp Fiction. Speaking of musical guests, Ray Charles made an appearance once. They ran Runaway by Glenn Nishida over a fourth season cold open, which I tracked down and added to my collection. It was very much in the style of Forever Freestyle. And Billy Joel was so inspired by the show, he wrote something called Big Man on Mulberry Street that ran as an extended song and dance sequence in what looked like nothing so much as a set of cheers. The thing about Moonlighting is that the problems I've identified would be super easy to fix. Recur a few law enforcement characters, feed in a few small side and subplots that seem unrelated but end up solving the thing. I mean, it's billed as a romantic comic drama. You've got the whole office full of extras who rarely speak, occasionally have them, I don't know, follow some leads. I think they figured something like that out by the third season. Long acknowledged golden thread for this collection, Curtis Armstrong, most recently of Revenge of the Nerds at the time, if memory serves, came on board as sort of junior detective. I remember not liking him, but probably that's saying more about me than him. The cases often resolved themselves, or weren't cases at all, or in one instance the bad guy was foiled by a prop master retrieving the handgun he was holding because they were wrapping the shot. This one starred a high-glamour Whoopi Goldberg crafting her audition reel for Sister Act, and the bad guy was some sort of vice cop who was also on the take, so in any event it was going to be a difficult storyline to resolve. I didn't buy Whoopi's character as a bigamist because she never married anyone who was going to live for very much longer. The elderly gentleman she's married in cold open dies during the ceremony. Chasing her down makes no sense because it's only till death do you part. If you barely have her on this one, no one even managed I Do. And not to downplay personality conflicts, but a few of my favorite shows have suffered like this. Sybil and Bruce, then referenced in Moonlighting itself, Johnny and Joan, and more recently Nathan Fillion and Stana Katic in Castle, and probably all kinds of shows. Chevy Chase and apparently everyone involved in Community, for one example. These personality conflicts that are so unhideable. I know there's no way to completely undo this kind of stuff, but for Moonlighting, the production schedule did not help. Some episodes took weeks to shoot, some scenes were written the day of shooting, and there must have been so much standing around time for crew and extras. Certainly not cheap. We had in-show commentary on this. Third season aired an Entertainment Tonight-style mockumentary hosted by Rhoda Barrett as herself, interviewing the characters about how they worked together. Bruce walked into scenes after pointed dialogue about how late he was. Regardless of acting skills, it's tough to miss Sybil's distaste for this proto-#MeToo environment, which, be fair, made what on-screen chemistry they did manage almost magical. Probably a huge part of that was talking through, over, and past each other, and my guess is that the rest of it was talent, pure and simple. If your leads can't get along, the storytelling suffers, and in this case, that was definitely true. Anyway, Moonlighting definitely had issues, but it was a formative part of my own comedic backstory, and the one episode I was truly looking forward to seeing, the Dave and Maddie version of Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, just blew my mind with how entertaining it was, and I enjoyed it on so many more levels than I did at the time. Beautiful work, well done everyone, and made this whole process worth it. Now, binging 5 seasons of Moonlighting is a trip not only for the guest stars and the cameos, but the production values. Picture Maker uses the same production animation at the end of Moonlighting as they did in Medium, and the second season episode from 1986, there was this little intro where Maddie and Dave address the camera and characters, saying that they'd planned to do a 3D effect and send glasses out to every home in America, but made a lame dig. Oh, you know the post office, and said, so when you get the glasses, hold on to them, then watch the rerun. Well, there weren't any 3D effects in that episode, even with Maddie facing the camera and arching her back a little as David directed her to, so yeah, 80s gross. But what stood out to me is 19 years later, Medium, produced by the same production company, Picture Maker, had an art-centered episode called Still Life, which I remembered immediately when they mentioned the 3D effect on Moonlighting, and did a catalog search for the episode, and it hadn't turned up yet. And then it did. On disc 1581, I found my archived copy of Medium, Season 2, Episode 9, Still Life, which opened Twilight Zone style, using manipulated archive footage of Rod Serling, explaining to us when to put on our 3D glasses, noting that the show was edited to be viewable without them as well. I pulled them out. Yep, turns out I still have them from when they sent them out in November of 2005, some 2 decades after first mentioning them, and I watched the portions of the show meant to be viewed with them, and honestly, Kinda lame. I don't know if my recording wasn't presenting the reds and blues as vividly as initial broadcast, or maybe they just looked different on my screen, but over in Moonlighting, David Addison was recalling Vincent Price in House of Wax playing paddleball out over the audience. The in-your-face aspect of the 3D effects were decidedly mild by comparison, especially since at one point in Medium I was supposed to be witnessing a murder in all its gory intrigue, but mostly I was just fussing with my glasses. Bah. Still, I feel it was at least remarkable for Hulu to have gotten the rebroadcast rights for Moonlighting, and for me to just now have a chance to watch it right at this specific moment as Medium's still life episode turned up in my collection. What an astonishing coincidence. And for me to have turned up the very 3D glasses they sent out nearly 2 decades ago so as to watch it properly. I mean, this is just blowing my mind a little. Not to mention randomly encountering a bunch of sci-fi rebroadcast Twilight Zone episodes in my classic collection as well. That's just so, yeah, the effect wasn't fantastic. I mean, Sybil is always lovely, of course, but points for trying and for this time actually sending out the glasses and following through on the production. Good work, picture maker. One final note. Apart from Medium, I also encountered this intriguing Moonlighting coincidence while watching the 4th and 5th seasons of Fringe. Maddie Hayes Vegas marries a rando she met on a train ride from Chicago to LA, played by Dennis Dugan, named Walter Bishop. Huh? You know, like John Noble's character on Fringe, who himself comes in distinct present-day 1980s and Walternet flavors, as the Moonlighting version says upon meeting the staff at the Blue Moon Detective Agency.
And you are?
I'm Walter Bishop.
You're Walter Bishop?
The Walter Bishop? Well, I'm sure there must be others, but I consider myself unique in my own way.
This is just wild. Other stuff I've been watching in movies, I finally caught the Spider-Man No Way Home production, which answered a few questions hanging in the air for me between Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I archived Robert Pattinson's The Batman, which I think played better on the big screen, but quite enjoyable. I recently rewatched my VHS copy of Down with Love with Rachel Zellweger and Ewan McGregor, but mostly Niles from Frasier. Then I also caught Alanis Morissette's outstanding performance on public television's Austin City Limits. There are so many great and beloved songs from her Jagged Little Pill and supposed former infatuation junkie. I completely missed that there were a couple I did not recognize at all. Reasons I Drink, Smiling, and Uninvited, which, wow, the examination of this interaction reminds me of nothing so much as the fly at the beginning of Aeon Flux getting caught in a web of prehensile eyelashes and scanned. The song was a 1998 soundtrack for City of Angels and explores in excruciating detail an interaction that has overstepped, transgressed. The tension in the words is reflected in the voice of the woman singing them. There's a way to hear this song that she's asserting her power, and there's a way to hear this song that she's hoping to survive this encounter. So just saying the bear has been winning this matchup for a long, long time. Alanis put on a fantastic non-stop hour-long show, or editing to make it seem that way, for an engaged and delighted crowd, and I was so happy I saw it in the lineup it was time to record it. It made up somewhat for the concert I missed in 1998 or thereabouts, so I searched haplessly for the receiving line for Tori Amos, who'd opened for her, and then ultimately gave up when I saw Tori fans listlessly wandering around the parking garage and realized none of us knew what was going on, and in the absence of anything official, his behavior was just creepy and stalkery. Sorry. If nothing else, I had a much better view on my screen than I had from my seat. In the live show I took in with my friend Curtis in Minneapolis, Alanis was a tiny dot a mile away. Sound and energy, of course, were fantastic in both. I'll close out this section with some comments on the new season of Doctor Who, which is so new it's starting its new Disney Plus run actually as a reboot to season 1, though one thing in its favor is it's aware of the 60 years of history fans are bringing with them to the show. What we are meant to understand about 14, and longtime video fuzzies already know my restive distaste for the arbitrary numbering, especially now, this Doctor, is that 10, sure, on some level that one beyond Jodie Whittaker was and still is 10, despite him also being 11 per his own regen to himself, and 12 per the War Doctor, and 14 per his regen back into himself, or 22 per 4's memories, or potentially 4,726 per 13's memories. OK10 is hanging out with Donna and fam somewhere quietly doing the work, doing the therapy and pulling himself back together, all of which benefits 14, who fully healed from potentially everything 10 knows about, which is plenty, and he's still got a fob somewhere in the Eye of Harmony ready with his entire backstory when he's, feeling up to it. Since episode the very first was bringing us up to speed with what this show even is, none of us were lumbered with the many things that have happened over the history of this show. We just got the very pretty 14, played charmingly by Trudy and his utterly fantastic companion Ruby Sunday, played by Millie Gibson. There are huge shades of Rose with a bright, young, talented thing encountering the Doctor and signing on to maybe learn more about her past. That was a big pull for our Rose, played by Billie Piper, she of the gymnastics training and the daddy issues, and now we've got Ruby, also blonde, bright and beautiful, with the 4 letters name off in red thing also beginning with R, looking for her mum and to the complete exclusion of her dad. Ruby, was raised in foster care by a mum who loves her. She turned 21 on Christmas Eve and doesn't seem like we're far removed. I notice the Doc keeps destroying their upstairs flat, though. Really must wave a sonic about one that installs drywall. The very distant future they visit has space babies to save and a baddie to fight. It is noted as almost prototypical children's story. Then episode the second, The Devil's Chord, is very music-centered, as is Ruby BT Dubs. As we met her, she was playing keyboards in a very local band, and 2 of her adventures now have involved musical improvisation. She's faced Goblin, the boogeyman, and on this visit to the Beatles, climbing out of a piano, she's facing down Jinx Monsoon as something stepped directly out of Yellow Submarine, perhaps. Fitting, since Ruby hoped to meet the Beatles, and there they are, warbling out tuneless palaver about a cat somewhere, soulless because 4 decades to the west, a sensation, a god of music, if you will, was summoned by a sequence of notes, the Devil's Chord, apparent child of the Toymaker. We have more of these harbingers climbing into the Mavityverse, because when the Doc met Ruby, music was happening just fine. Entire shiploads of goblins were singing for their supper, and the Doctor was just alive with the joy of dance. From 1925 onward, in this revision, music is not happening and continues to not happen until humanity simply destroys itself in nuclear winter. Improbably, the Beatles, intuiting something is amiss, do want to put what musicality they can out into the world, despite it being a shadow of their well-known and long-acknowledged talent. The outcome from a confrontation of music or Blue Meanie cannot be satisfying. I love Jinx, but I cannot imagine that if music were a character, it would be villainous. So absolutely reject the premise, but these are the shows we're getting. Doctor Who, even when disappointing, even when unacceptable, is at least populated by characters who, upon witnessing situations they cannot abide, do something about it, which leans in the direction of adventurous and helping, and I do enjoy that energy. And now, what I've been watching. Last month, when I was just racking my brain how to organize my thoughts of the impact of some 35 years of Indigo Girls in my collection for episode 10 VideoFuzzy the soundtrack, well worth a listen, please track it down and check it out. One thing I knew was the project had to focus on my music collection. I do have VHS tapes and DVDs of several artists that may well come up for discussion, especially with the addition of Toby to my collection, the very late model Toshiba brand VHS DVD dubber I got from my folks. I'm happy to report has played every VHS tape I've fed with 0 issues, knock wood. That's the machine I used to watch my VHS copy of Watershed, 10 Years of Underground Video, released in 1995. The Indigo Girls' latest releases at that point were Swampophilia in 1994 and 1200 Curfews in 1995. The latter refer to the venues they played over the course of a dozen or so years of live performances. They had curfews, which meant shutdown time, so venues could clear out and shut down for the night. First thing I needed to correct from episode 10 Caramia is, no, I didn't think it would affect anything, but I was misremembering Emily and Amy I was sure I learned it from liner notes on one of my cassettes. Amy is Amy Ray, brunette. Emily is Emily Salyers, blonde. You see a photo, you get an image in your head wrong, and it stays there, I guess. But one place it mattered was a half-formed memory I was relating of Amy. for sure. If it was either of them, it was Amy. Taking the lead, later 90s live performance of Cut It Out, I was relating. Otherwise, my episode quoted news items attributed to one or the other, none of which attached photos, and I remained blissfully unaware that the first thing Watershed did was generate their names with arrows, so even people who had been getting it wrong for years could get up to speed on who was who. The tape was a compilation of concert, backstage, side, and fan footage they collected over the years, directed and produced by Susan Lambert. I mentioned one recurring theme in their work seemed to celebrate documentation. It was clear they had miles of video to work with in putting this together. It was only the crediting error I included. I did need to remember their videos more clearly. Closer to Fine, the group they were leading down the road they described as Pied Piper energy included men and kids as well as women, so details. They said they filmed that video with their friends in Atlanta. Along with music videos for Closer to Fine, Hammer and a Nail, Galileo, Joking, Touch Me Fall, Least Complicated, and Power of Two, we as viewers were treated to just the most wonderfully exclusive, never going to see it anywhere else B-roll of 1985-1989 live performances of Crazy Game, which commentary noted 4 days after that performance they inked a deal with Epic. Also, live performance video of Land of Canaan, Cut It Out, World Falls, Chicken Man, and Prince of Darkness. There's a beautiful black and white a cappella passage where they are harmonizing through the hymn, This Is My Song, sung to the tune of John Sibelius's Finlandia. It's a powerful image. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for the land and for mine. I remembered as I watched the footage included the 1995 concert I attended in Fargo was their Honor the Earth tour. I had a poster from that for a while. I think it survived a few moves, but I don't have that anymore, no. I needed to highlight a couple of the commercial video releases. So Galileo, I think, fit an aesthetic we were seeing of text and videos. I think the best example I can think of probably right now by Van Halen, but the Indigo Girls were in a lot of different costumes evoking past lives. The text was sometimes a little tough to interpret. They talking about themselves, or if there'd been fan submissions, I'm just not sure what was the case, but it was entertaining if slightly off the mark illustration of what was going on in the song itself. Speaking of words on screen, their video release for Least Complicated was very interesting. I think it was the first time I'd ever seen guitar chords posted in real time as they played. They included notation from instruments involved, as well as on-screen lyrics and commentary. So, at one point I laughed very hard. I was so not expecting the song continued, but the screen said, "The past sucks. Forget it. I want to go home. It's over." Like, maybe your inner monologue is suddenly out loud. I have no idea, but I thought it was a hilarious inclusion. The footage from Hammer and Nail was hitting home when I was writing my senior thesis through the early 90s on economic development in developing nations. There was a philosophy forming in the work that was resonating with their words. My life is part of the global life. I find myself becoming more immobile when I think a little girl in the world can't do anything. A destination, my community, and a street person, my responsibility. And if I have a care in the world, I have a gift to bring. Activate. These videos document tours of the 1980s into the 90s, raise awareness about global warming, hunger, clean water and resources, poverty, pollution, these priorities. Go ahead and dismiss if you've got another planet you feel like God is a backup. Otherwise, the note they shared, planet hit 6 billion people in 1988, and we've added 2 billion more in 3 decades since. We need to explore realities like carrying capacity, rising sea levels, deforestation, desalinization, just to take care of who's already here, never mind rolling the dice on a few billion more. They shared a recording from their debut on local cable where the host characterized them as intense acoustic folk rock music, music with a message. I love that message has continued in the decades since this video was made. I forgot to mention, I was seeing something about this current concert scheduling. It adds streaming capabilities, so maybe we can boost their signal and enjoy their energy from the comfort of our own homes. Fair warning, I haven't looked into it, probably a lot less than $500 a ticket. I will say this of their work, their creative process, their goodness, how much younger we all were back then. It made a nice companion to the exploration I gave in my sister podcast. Truly felt fit much better here, and I was happy to share it with you. Oh, if you'd like to see it yourself, it looks like it's available as a DVD for $4 on Amazon. You can check it out. Finally, if you get a chance to take in a performance of Wheel of Fortune live, I highly recommend. Ralph stood me to production last week, and it was a great show. The announcer was Cody Dove, billed in reference to his appearance on Better Call Saul. IMDb tattled on him. He appeared in one 6th-season episode as Mr. Oliver, and nope, not ringing any kind of a bell, but having mentioned Better Call Saul, he had the diploma he received from the acting school of Bob Odenkirk stapled to his face. This entire presentation was gonzo goofery, fried deeply in style. I'm rewatching the first couple seasons right now on Netflix, and you'd be forgiven for imagining he'd been understudying for the title role. So, alongside Saul Goodman's Mini-Me, the stage production at Prairie Heights Casino in Fort Yates, some 40 minutes south of us, we had stormy weather to contend with getting there, but the crowd was good. It was enthusiastic. A lot of people were hoping to get on that stage and play for a $10,000 prize. It was not won. They played for points anyway, won $200 participation prizes, but someone did win a trip to Vegas. The letters were turned by Daisy Wang, and I think our host for the night was Bob Gone, who hosted the show for a couple of minutes in the late 1980s. I had more to say about Mr. Odenkirk. Cody Dove, because while they set up between shows, he'd come out in the audience and play mini puzzles with randomly chosen audience members. Ralph and I are longtime fans of the show. Between us, we were always able to figure out the puzzles long before the contestants, but we knew full well there's a difference between watching it play out on screen while we can build on each other's guesses and staring at a board that suddenly doesn't look like it could possibly spell a word in English. So I was happy to sit out in the audience and enjoy the contestants as they figured it out. There were some high drama moments when a bankrupt wiped out so many points, and when most of a puzzle was filled in, the contestant took till the very last possible second to figure it out. But yeah, it's a good time. Everyone is cheering everyone on. Seriously, by a show of hands, it looked like everyone in the audience had been fans of the show for decades, and if you go try out, from where we sat, it looked like a lot of fun. Oh, quick closing note, looks like on the network broadcast production, Pat Sajak, the final episode before he retires, is airing June 7th, so you can check that out if you get a chance. And with that, absolutely time to get this in the feed. I'm celebrating 7 years of this production next month, so I'm hoping to get something fun put together for that. In the meantime, thank you all for checking out my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at VideoFuzzy.blogspot.com. For past episodes, subscribe and follow VideoFuzzy wherever you get your podcasts. If you get a chance, check out my VideoFuzzy the soundtrack interviews as well. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites via email to tjaman1970@yahoo.com or through my VideoFuzzy pages on Instagram, Threads. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing. It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.